I like how someone had described quiche in a cookbook once. If you don't know what quiche is, it's basically an egg pie. Oh, I just had to describe quiche to a housemate today. How did that go, Bird? how did that go? I'm curious. Where is... Yes, here we go. Here's the one I wanted to check out next. Because I love me potato chips, so I'm very interested. Does he not have a Pokemon plush in the background for this one? Does he not have a Pokemon? Never mind, it's a pile of swine. It's over here. Never mind, it's a pile of swine. Okay. I thought that was a potato at first. I thought that was a potato at first. No, it's a little plushy pile of swine. I thought that was a big potato. Okay, okay. Max, that's clever. Max, that's clever. He was confused, but he'll eat up almost anything and give it an enthusiastic thumbs up. Oh, that's awesome. Hell yeah. That's fantastic, Bird. Nice, 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 nice. I came up with a very summary. I came up with a very summary quiche, like literally over this summer. It was bacon, mushroom, and what was the last one? Asparagus. Bacon, mushroom, and asparagus. And like, yo, that turned out really well. That turned out really, really well, actually. Oh man, 10 out of 10 would make that again. Unfortunately, I no longer have my quiche pan. I'm gonna have to get a new one. I'm gonna have to get a new one. It met with an unfortunate end, shall we say? You know what would have been appropriate, chat, if I had a bag of potato chips for this one, but all right, let's boogie.
So there's a story going around on the internet that says potato chips were invented near Saratoga Springs, New York in 1853.
I've heard this before.
It's even on the website of the Smithsonian, so yeah, it's got to be true, right?
I was about to say, I've definitely heard that story before. That's what we were taught. Spoilers, chat. That's what we were taught in culinary school. Okay? That's what we were taught in culinary school. So there is a good chance this video might debunk something I got taught at the Culinary Institute of America. There is a solid chance for that happening.
Wrong, and I am going to prove it by making a recipe for potato chips from 1817, 36 years before the story took place.
Oh, snap.
The history, both fake and real, of the potato chip. This time on Tasting History.
Buckle up, chat. Here we go. I'm interested. The X-Files cooking version. I love.
So the recipe that I'm working from today to dispel the spurious claim that the potato chip was invented in 1853 comes from The Cook's Oracle, an 1817 English cookbook by Dr. William Kitchener.
1817?
Now, the American term chip nor the British term crisp had come into common use
I was about to say.
He calls them potatoes fried in slices or shavings.
Man, I am glad we I am glad we shortened that down. I am glad we shortened that. Oh my goodness.
Peel large potatoes, slice them about 1/4 inch thick, or cut them in shavings round and round as you would peel a lemon. Dry them well in a clean cloth and fry them in lard or dripping. Take care that your fat and frying pan...
Don't tell Dylan. Don't tell Dylan. This uses lard. Don't tell Dylan. He's gonna blow a gasket. Don't tell Dylan, he's gonna lose his mind. Chat, don't tell Dylan. Lard! Oh my god.
are quite clean. Put it on a quick fire, watch it, and as soon as the lard boils and is still, put in the slices of potato and keep moving them.
We have to tell him. We must warn him.
Take them up and lay them to drain on a sieve. Send them up.
What is it with dead people and lard?
Sprinkled over them. So he says they
what do you want me to do with this? Call the CDC.
Which is a lot thicker than you would make a potato chip today, but nowhere near as thick as you would make like a French fry.
I was about to say they are definitely
chip in England. Another way that they're different from French fries is he says they should be crisp, and French fries aren't usually crisp, especially if you're in England.
Somewhere in the northwest of the United States, a Twix suddenly feels a sense of dread.
Is this the origin of the English term crisp, meaning
oh my God.
potato chip? I don't know. Either way, I am going to make these 1/4 of an inch thick and
that's thick
an
as hell.
Inch thick, which is what later recipes call for from the mid to late 19th century. So for this recipe, all you need is a
the
few
closest
potatoes,
thing I have to a
pound,
nemesis.
and you want to use either russet potatoes or any high-starch potato. That's going to work best for this. And then about 2 quarts of lard.
Oh my God, that's a lot of lard.
Kind of oil. He mentions.
Oh, that's a lot of lard, chat. Oh my God. Ooh, chat, that's a lot of lard. Oh my God, I can feel my arteries clogging. Holy Jesus. That's a lot of lard.
Lard, but you can use a different type of oil if you would prefer.
Oh boy.
Lard tastes great, so that's what I'm using. Then just a bit of salt.
Oh no, don't tell Dylan that.
Peel the potatoes and then slice them. You can use a knife for this, but you want them to be very, very even, so I'm going to be using a mandolin slicer.
Yeah.
1, because that's frankly the best way to slice potatoes evenly.
Yep.
And 2, it is something that they would have had available at the time. In fact, similar tools
That's also
appear
true,
as far
Bird,
back as the Opera di Bartolomeo
He was,
Scaffi,
Zach,
and
you're
by
right,
the 18th century, they were pretty much what we use today. And there's actually some fake
the recipe also said dripping, so it could use beef fat or chicken fat or even duck fat.
Internet. On some sites, you will find claims that it was
okay. All right, side note, because Fetch, you just reminded me of something. There was a day at the when I was still in culinary school where chef just told us because we had certain days which were called free study days, which meant sometimes you didn't have to report to class at all, sometimes you did have to report to class, but you were really basically allowed to do whatever. This was one of those times. Our chef instructor at the time basically told us to like take whatever techniques you've learned so far and just make something. He split us up into groups, and he's just like, just make enough. There's kind of like a practical exam almost, but like not an exam, but like practical application of what we had learned. And so he split the class into a few groups. He's like, make something. Like everybody make enough food to feed the class lunch for today. And then you can clean up and then go home. I'm just like, we can get creative. We can get creative. Yeah, no, exactly, Bird. Yeah, exactly. 100%. The group I was in, because we realized we had duck fat in the classroom walk-in. So chat, of course, us being us in culinary school, we proceeded to make a big old batch of duck fat French fries. Ooh. Oh, but we didn't stop there. Because then once they were out of the fryer, we immediately tossed them in a little bit of sea salt and then freshly grated Parmesan cheese, like while they were still hot. Right? Ooh. To this day, I think some of the best fries I've ever had in my goddamn life. Like while they were still piping hot. So it's just like, yes. Yes, good. Yes, good. There's a gastropub in my area that does duck fat fries and duck fat fries poutine. Oh, with shredded duck leg confit. Oh. Bird, that sounds incredible. Hello, holy Jesus. I need
By Dr.
that.
Joseph Ignace Guillotin, famous for another slicing device, the guillotine.
Whoa, timeout. Whoa, timeout. That escalated quickly. Ooh, that escalated quickly. Rewind. Rewind.
Joseph Ignace Guillotin, famous for another slicing device, the guillotine.
Ooh, that escalated quickly. God, that just put another. Oh boy, that just put another B. Dylan Hollis quote into my brain. French Revolution or pineapple.
And it would be really, really cool if that was true. When I first read that, I was like, oh, let this actually be a thing. But turns out it's not, or at least there is no evidence to suggest that it is. So,
oh, that's unfortunate.
Now, this recipe is very simple. It says that you just slice the potatoes and then dry them and fry them. There is no mention of washing them or putting them in any kind of solution that will strip away
Stream Elements bot, you are so late.
The common method that is used today because it's going to allow you
Stream
to
Elements
leave them
bot,
in
you
the
are
fryer
so
longer
late.
before they get dark. But he doesn't say to do that, so I'm not doing that. So all I'm doing is slicing the potatoes and then drying them well and then heating up my fat. Now, whatever fat you're using, you want to bring it up to around 365 degrees Fahrenheit or 185 Celsius before adding your potatoes. Once you've added the potatoes, they're going to bubble all about and the temperature of the oil is going to drop considerably, but that is okay. We actually want it to drop to between 240 and 250 degrees Fahrenheit.
Really?
And that's actually where you want to keep it for most of the frying. And depending on the width of the potato slice, is going to depend on how long you need to fry it. They're really, really thin. 5 to 7 minutes is fine. My 1/4 of an inch thick potatoes, though, they needed about 15 minutes at
Jesus H. Christmas.
And the thing is, you
that's a long
have
time.
to do this a little bit to know when they're done. A lot of the bubbles will stop bubbling, but there still will be some, and it will start to darken. But you got to kind of find that sweet spot.
That's a lot.
Also, in 1817, they wouldn't have had thermometers, so that too, just telling the temperature of the fat, that too would have had to been done just by doing it. Trial and error.
Trial and error, yeah.
Now, while they fry, the recipe says to keep moving them around. It doesn't need to be constant, but this will keep them from sticking and will allow them to fry more evenly.
I would make it constant moving around.
In that 240 to 250 range,
coffee might
you can
hit my
raise
mic
the
stand.
temperature up to close to 300, but don't go over 300. Then keep it there for about the last 5 minutes. This will help them really.
I was about to say that because you need to crisp up the
darker.
outside.
And he says that they're ready once they are crisp. It is kind of hard to tell when they are crisp, but by stirring them around, you'll start to kind of feel the potato, and once they're not given any
that checks, honestly. I remember doing that back in the day.
Then take them out and set them on a large flat sieve like the recipe says, or you can just use some paper towel laid over a cooling rack. Essentially, all you're trying to do is let any excess grease drain out. Yep. After a minute or so, sprinkle with a bit of salt and toss them and let them cool to room temperature. And while they cool, make sure you are subscribed to Tasting History as we look at the fake history
you'll love to see it.
of potato chips.
All right, Max. Let's see if we debunk everything. One thing I learned at culinary school today.
It all took place at Moon's Lake House, a fine establishment serving high-quality victuals to the muckety-mucks come up from New York City. Now, the restaurant itself was owned by a Mr. Carey Moon, but all the cooking was done by Catherine Wicks, affectionately known as Aunt Kate, and her brother, George Speck Crum. So one version of the story goes that George is back in the kitchen, a well-to-do customer. Sometimes the customer is Cornelius Vanderbilt in some versions, but a well-to-do customer comes in and orders some fried potatoes, which were on the menu. George fries up the potatoes, sends them out, and the customer says, no, they need to be thinner like I had in France. Ooh la la. So George slices them thinner, sends them out again,
ooh la la.
and once again, nope, not thin enough.
My
this
God.
goes on several times, depending on who's telling the tale, until finally George, fed up
This is
with
the story I heard.
difficult customer, slices the potatoes so thin that you could even see through them. Wafer thin. Then he fries them up, salts them, and sends them out to the customer, assuming that the customer would be embarrassed or upset at how silly these thin
This was the
potatoes
story I heard.
were.
This was the story I heard.
The customer loved them and ate the whole basket or plate or whatever they were served on, just polished them off, and thus born was the potato chip. The first problem with this story is that, as evidenced by the recipe that we're making today, they already existed, both in an English cookbook and in several American cookbooks, like the Virginia Housewife from 1824.
1824?
Though that one pretty much just copied word for word the English recipe, so do with that what you will.
Okay.
Also, there are so many variations on this story: who the customer was, exactly when it was, even who was doing the cooking, because sometimes it was Aunt Kate, his sister, who sometimes is also his sister-in-law. It's an absolute mess. Anyway, there's so much variation that it's hard to actually say what happened. Also, the first time that any of this seemed to have been talked about or written down wasn't until 30 years after it supposedly took place.
Word of mouth storytelling. Here we go.
All of the internet, published publications, of course it's published, it's publication. Anyway, it gets spread around, and so you just gotta always kind of find those original sources, and if you can't find them, well, maybe something's amiss.
Something might be missing,
even though the story, as was told, probably never happened, there is some truth to it, because George Crum, who was very much a real person, was a very respected chef and later owned his own restaurant near Saratoga Springs. And he probably is the person to have either first made potato chips very, very thin, or at least he's the first person to have popularized them.
Okay, see, that checks out then.
Became known as Saratoga chips. In 1883, Jessup Whitehead wrote in the Chicago Herald Cooking School that potatoes sliced thick are not Saratogas, though generally so called. The true chips are as thin as paper and curl up when fried. They are used cold as well as hot, and may be prepared before wanted and kept a considerable time. And by the end of the 19th century, this style of chip was very much associated with George Crum and his restaurant. Not to dine at Crum's at the lake is to be out of the world and out of the fashion. Crum has owned the place for 10 years and has made a big success of it, and there first appeared to a waiting, hungry world the delectable morsels known as Saratoga chips.
Okay, that's cool.
These Saratoga chips were incredibly popular, and by the late 19th century, there were recipes in many, many American cookbooks for them.
Okay, color me interested then. That's kind of neat.
Saratoga chip slicers, specially designed for slicing Saratoga chips, except that they weren't. They were actually just regular potato slicers, but they would say that they were specially designed for Saratoga chips because it sold more slicers.
Yeah, marketing. That's basic marketing strategy 101, chat. Yeah. Basic marketing strategy 101. Oh my goodness.
Then in 1895, William Tappenden of Ohio began boxing up the chips and selling them to stores. The only problem with that is that the chips would go stale rather quickly. The merest bit of humidity and the chips are no longer crisp.
Merchandising where the real money is made, absolutely.
In 1926, when a California woman named Laura Scudder, famous now for her peanut butter, she debuted a bag of wax paper that could be filled with chips and then sealed. She even put a date of not expiration but of freshness on the bag, letting you know how long they would be nice and crisp. And she marketed them as Laura Scudder's potato chips, the noisiest chips in the world. And around this time, across the pond in England, where instead of chips they had taken on the name Crisps, the Smith's Potato Crisps Company began selling the chips in grease-proof paper bags all over London. And with the bag of potato chips came a little sachet of salt so you could flavor the chips yourself. And that pretty much was the only flavor added to potato chips for the...
That's kind of interesting. They actually gave you a salt packet so you could flavor it yourself. That's an interesting twist. I can't decide if I like that more or less. But that's a cool twist, I'm not gonna lie. I dig that.
Longest time.
I dig that.
It would take someone who really understood potatoes to take the chip to the next level in flavor. And of course, it would take an Irishman to do so.
Of
In
course.
1954, a man named Seamus was working for the Tato Irish Crisp Company, and under the direction of the owner, Joe Spud Murphy, they debuted
Salt probably
a
wouldn't stick to
cheese
cold dried
and
chips, though, that's true.
onion-flavored chip. They took off and became wildly popular. Other companies started getting in on the game. Very soon, the flavor was followed by salt and vinegar, but in America, it was actually sour cream and onion and barbecue that became popular. Now, the main issue with these...
That explains why, That explains why those specific flavors I see fucking everywhere. And for the record, chat, those are actually my 3 favorite flavors. Sour cream and onion, salt and vinegar, and barbecue are like my 3 favorite potato chip flavors ever. Like, I will demolish a bag of barbecue flavored potato chips literally by myself. For better or for worse. For better or for worse. That's how much I love them.
Crisps or chips was that in the bag they were so thin that they would often break up, and so you'd open the bag and really there'd just be a bunch of crumbs.
Yeah.
And then 2 companies decided to address this issue. The first was in the 1950s
I knew it.
with the corrugated potato chip, better known today as
Ruffles. Yeah.
Have ridges. Does anyone else remember those commercials?
Yep.
Like late 80s.
I remember those
90s.
commercials.
I'm dating myself. Well, it's because
It's
of those
fine, Max.
ridges
Don't
that
worry
the
about
chips
it.
had more
I understand.
structural integrity and so were less prone to breakage. The other solution came in 1956 when a chemist from Procter & Gamble decided to come up with a chip that was uniform in shape, a saddle-shaped chip
Pringles!
that could then be stacked and put in a cylinder
Pringles!
and sealed. The only issue was that the process of making this uniform chip was that it tasted
terrible.
And so it didn't go anywhere for quite some time. It took about a decade for them to revisit this idea, and when they did, they retooled the recipe and came up with Pringles newfangled potato chips.
I love it.
Really, they weren't potato chips because they were actually made of a
potato-based dough.
That was then molded into the shape of chips. And so the other big chip companies got together and put the squeeze on them, or instead they called the FDA, and the FDA said, yeah, actually, we need you to call them potato chips made from dried potatoes. Well, that isn't very catchy and probably wouldn't even fit on the can, so they decided to follow the British lead and call them potato crisps instead, though most people today just call them Pringles. Now, there was one other way that they stopped chips from breaking up in the bag.
Clever,
and that was
right
to
there.
Add air to the bag, which is why now when you open a bag of chips, it's only like a third full, and that just makes me frustrated.
Yeah, big same,
I don't
actually.
quite understand why they didn't just start making them thicker like the ones today that I'm making. But it turns out that they did, because
Someone called
kettle
Jealous and
chips
Pringle-faced.
started to come back in the 80s and 90s, and they are thicker and made by taking the...
Chat, I love kettle chips. I love kettle chips. I love kettle chips. Did I mention I fucking love kettle chips? Ooh, yes. The crunch. The crunch is superior, chat. The crunch is superior.
potatoes and putting them into a kettle of oil and frying them, and they don't break as easily.
Yes.
So even though they
sea salt and vinegar kettle chips, fuck yes.
to fry,
I will
am
kill that
looking
bag by
forward to my
myself.
Unbreakable potato chips from 1870.
I will kill that bag
And
by
here we are,
myself.
The
Ooh.
first recipe for potato chips. All right, so I've got the 1/4 inch thick and the 1/8 of an inch thick. Honestly, not a huge difference in how thick they are, it looks like. These curled up a little bit more, the 1/8 of an inch thick ones. And
I will kill that
according
bag
to
of
two sources
sea salt
from the
and
19th
vinegar.
century, the thinner they are,
Salt
the
and
more
vinegar
they will
chips.
curl.
By myself.
But the color is pretty uniform. Let's start with that 1/4 inch thick one.
Oh, that crunch!
Crunchy. I'm actually kind of surprised.
Oh, that crunch!
So I gotta say, the flavor is
Oh,
so superior to a regular potato chip. And I love potato chips, but
My whole life I didn't really like
just
normal
get
potato
so
chips or
much
Pringles
more
or even Ruffles. Texture issue, but once
potato.
kettle chips got popular in the last 10
really
years, I found what
tastes
I had
like
been
just
missing. Bird, I
mashed
feel you.
potatoes and
Bird, I
lard.
feel you.
So essentially, that's what it is. But
Ooh, that crunch though.
really,
wow.
really good. And they're not greasy. I thought they would be because of the thickness, that they would kind of absorb it. But let's try the thinner one. 1/8 of an inch. Here we go.
Oh,
Even
that
crunchier.
crunch. Yeah, that crunch.
And maybe
Oh.
a better flavor. There's almost a hint
Ooh.
of... It's not burning. It's that Maillard reaction that kind of gives that
Big,
really
the
savoriness
Maillard
to it
reaction.
and
Yeah.
elevates the flavor. So it's not just potato and oil. It's a new flavor. But again, this is a lot more flavorful than your average potato chip that you would get today. Maybe that's why kettle chips have really made a comeback, because they do taste better. The only problem with kettle chips is that because they're more sturdy and they don't break as easily, they always cut the inside of my mouth, like the roof of my mouth. I'll eat a bag of kettle chips and regret it for the next 48 hours. But while I'm doing it, I'm very, very happy.
Oh, that crunch. Oh my God,
So
that's
since we talked
so
about
good.
some fake history here on the show today, I wanted to show you this book. It is called Fake History, 101 Things That Never Happened, by the Fake History Hunter on Twitter. Follow her. She's fantastic. She's always
At Fake History
about,
Hunter.
like,
I have to check them out.
picking fights with people who are posting fake history online. She's great.
That's kind of amazing.
In this, not only does she attack some of the most common fake history memes and things that are floating around on the internet, but then she goes in and debunks it and tells you why it's debunked and what are the original sources. Where are the original sources if there are none? You know.
Okay, interesting.
She really does her research. It's fascinating.
That's kind of cool. I might have to check that person out. I'm not gonna lie.
History as well.
Can I recommend a video? It's a cocktail video. It's 3 versions of pina colada.
Kind of
Link it,
debunk
Bird.
things
Link
on
it.
your own, or
Go for
them,
it.
because there's a lot of real history out there as well. So yeah, try the book, try the chips, and I will see you next time on Tasting History.